So this is a part two continuation of my video. In the part one, I mentioned how I'm a Nigerian transgender and my mother's daughters, Bolanle and Flora, with U.S. citizenship, were able to kill my mother here in New York City and took her body away, kidnapped her, and went and buried her, in a secret location in New Jersey. Even though I went to the medical examiner's office, they won't release my mother's body to me. Our daughters went and signed a fraudulent paper to snatch my mother's body corpse out of the medical examiner's office, and I'm being discriminated against based on my being transgender and Nigerian. So my mother was saying her daughters, Bolani and Flora, were part of a gang, and they were after money. Because in my earlier video, I stated that the immigration arrested me wrongfully. In 2000, my mother had a green card, and I came to America with my mother, and I had a green card stamped with my passport. I was arrested in JFK Airport. They said children are not welcome in America, which was against the law, because before me, Elian Gonzalez, if people remember Elian Gonzalez, I think in 1998, his mother was fleeing Cuba to America. He was underage, and the mother drowned. And the child arrived in Florida, and so he was living with his mother's family in Florida, and the U.S. immigration under Clinton said he had to return the boy to his father in Cuba, because his father was working for Castro, and the father said he wants his son back, and the mother's family in Florida were like, the father's abusive, and the mother was fleeing Cuba and drowned with his child, but the child survived, and they can't return the child back to Cuba because the father is abusive. And the whole world was in Nigeria watching TV. The whole world was watching. But the U.S. Went and got a court order. The U.S. immigration said under American law, you can't separate a child from the parent. The parent has the right to be with the child, wherever the parent is. So they said since the mother is already dead, the father is alive in Cuba. And even though the law says any Cuban that enters America through Miami was entitled to a green card under the Cuban Adjustment Relief Act. I think it's called CARA. Be wrong, but it's the law. So the child was immediately entitled to U.S. permanent residency. So the family of the mother in Florida said the child is as good as a U.S. resident. They were going to process the papers. But the U.S. immigration, even though there was a line of people marching, the whole world was tuning in. The CNN International, everybody was watching all over the world. The local TV stations all over the world were tuning in. And they were, how the U.S. will handle this. Because everybody was marching, but they said the U.S. has to abide by international law and the local law that you cannot separate a child from the parent. And, so they went and got a court order and invaded the home and grabbed Elian Gonzalez, took him back to Cuba. So the reverse was the case. My mother had a green card. I was under 21. She brought me to America in 2000. And under immigration law, I'm considered a child because I was under 21. And we arrived at JFK. I was wearing a jumpsuit. I was wearing sneakers. So back then, they consider if you're wearing a jumpsuit, that you're a drug trader. So I was racially profiled. I just saw the immigration was giving me a bad look. And he arrested me. And, took my passport, my green card, and put me in removal proceedings. Just because I was wearing a jumpsuit, said children are not welcome in America. And took me away, for wearing a jumpsuit. And it was months later when I got released from immigration prison, a black American guy told me, I was wearing the same jumpsuit in Pennsylvania. And the guy told me to be careful that, if you're wearing a jumpsuit in America, the police would think you're a drug user, you're selling drugs, and they can arrest you. So I was like, oh, wow. No wonder why the U.S. immigration arrested me at the airport, because I arrived from Nigeria wearing a jumpsuit And so they just gave me this bad look and took my passport, took my green card stamp, and put me in deportation proceedings. My mother was crying, I was crying, you know, and locked me up. And I was calling my mother's daughter, while I was in immigration prison because she has U.S. citizenship. And people told me, the immigration told me that a U.S. citizen can bail me out because my mother only had a green card. They said the U.S. immigration, regards people with U.S. citizenship a higher status so they can bail you. So I was calling my mother's daughters that had U.S. passport. They were living in Pennsylvania, Bolin Lake, and she wouldn't answer the phone. I would leave her a voicemail. And she told me she was hearing my voicemail, but she just didn't want to answer my phone call. I was stuck in immigration prison for like many months, but there was more immigrants coming in 2000, and so the immigration decided to release me because they needed the bed space. So they threw me out in the middle of the night into the street, with my jumpsuit, and it was so cold. I wasn't used to the cold weather. I arrived in July. I was wearing a jumpsuit, and they threw me out in October in the middle of the night, So, and then I went to stay with my mother on Staten Island. Then the landlord kicked us out also because the landlord said that my mother didn't really tell him she has a child, and he thought that the apartment was only going to be for her. So he kicked us out. So we were staying in a hotel on Staten Island, and my mother got tired of paying for the hotel, paying for my immigration bills. So she tricked me and took me to her daughter's in Pennsylvania, kidnapped me really, because I didn't really know my way around. She told me to follow her. And we left Staten Island on the bus. We arrived in Manhattan. Boom, boom. We got on the Greyhound bus. I didn't know where we were headed. And she told me she had something to do real quick in Pennsylvania. We're going to come back to New York on the same day. I saw she bought ticket headed towards Pittsburgh. And I was saying, why are we going towards Pittsburgh? She was like, our daughter has something to give to her. And we're going, and we're going to come back real quick. And we arrived. And then I noticed my mother was saying, So I noticed my mother was getting in the car with the daughter. So I got in the car also because our daughters are very violent. They beat up a white family when they were a child. They were staying with in Pennsylvania, and they had to lock them up. They were very violent. They were out of control and stuff. So I didn't want to stay with them, So I stayed in the car with my mother, and I was in Pittsburgh in 2001. And I knew my mother was coming back to New York because she works in New York. So the daughter told me, the Flora said I can't come in the car. I should get out. So I told her I'm not getting out of the car unless, because my mother kidnapped me here, and I need her to take me back to New York. I have all my immigration document, my money in the hotel. We didn't check out the hotel. I have all my property in the hotel, and she kidnapped me. I said, I'm returning to New York with my mother. So my mother was like, don't worry, I'm getting off the car also. So I said, cool. So I was getting off the car. So my mother, didn't get off and closed the door. As I was about to close the door, also the floor sped off, so I fell off the car. And I landed on the floor. She ran me over. I was bloody, I sped off and drove her to the Greyhound station. So, and the other daughter, Bolin, called the police one day, said I was a crazy immigrant with a knife, about to kill them in Pennsylvania. So the police came and took me away and locked me up at the Mercy Hospital in Pittsburgh. I was trying to explain to the police I'm a kidnapped victim. I guess because of my foreign accent, the police in Pennsylvania did me dirty and just locked me up in the hospital where I was being medicated wrongfully. So I kept calling New York to speak with my lawyer, and I didn't really remember my lawyer's phone number. So I would just call random numbers of people in New York, and I would tell them, because, to help me find the phone number of my lawyer, DiPietro. So the hospital really believe I may be crazy. Like, why am I calling random people, telling them to call DiPietro? Who's this DiPietro? So they asked my mother's daughter, that who's this DiPietro I'm always trying to reach in New York? That I'm so obsessed, and my mother's daughter, Bolin, decided to gaslight the hospital. That, I'm really delusional. I'm thinking about that I have an immigration case. I don't have an immigration case. That as far as she knows, I'm an American citizen, so I don't have an immigration case. And she was lying. I had an immigration case. I used to call her from immigration prison. So she fooled the hospital. So I'm being that she has an American accent. So the hospital thought I was really delusional. They decided to up the medication and everything. And they almost killed me in that hospital. I was finally able to get across to my lawyer. Somebody gave me the phone number of my lawyer, Di Pietro. From calling random numbers, somebody decided to, so I called my lawyer, Di Pietro, and he called the hospital, and he told them I really have an immigration case in New York, and it was my mother's daughter's line. So the hospital apologized to me, and instead of prosecuting my mother's daughter for alien trafficking, kidnap, and my mother also, the hospital told me to go back to my mother's daughter's house. That okay, I shouldn't, that I said they're not going to help me. They could have gotten me a T visa, aliens, foreigners that are victim of a crime. So because of the corruption in the Pennsylvania medical system in 2001, I had a chance to save my life as an alien trafficked from New York to Pennsylvania. And I was run over with a car, with my mother's daughter's Flores car, and the other daughter, Polanyi. They always work as a team. Car, they're like twins, but they're born different years. They work as a team. They beat up a white family also. They always tag team on people. And so the other daughter, Flora, ran me over with a car, and the other daughter, Polanyi, called the police, said I was the one attacking them with a weapon. And I was left blood on the floor. But there were bystanders that were watching, and it was like they were watching a movie scene. The daughter ran me over with a car and sped away, and they saw me on the floor bloody, and the police came and snatched me up and took me away. And people were watching like, what is going on, Wayne? Why is this person being hit with a car and the police taking them away, and arresting them? So, it was just a bunch of lies from my mother's daughters. So I was in the hospital, and kidnapped, and when the hospital knew the truth, decided to hide the truth. And so I should return to my mother's daughters. That is just a mild family dysfunction. A mild family dysfunction. And they were like, you just go seek family therapy. Kidnapped, I was left bloody on the floor. I almost died. That's what your hospital in Pennsylvania considered an immigrant being trafficked, left bloody, and had hostage, forcefully, my psychiatric treated wrongfully, a mild family dysfunction. So it was really racist down there. So this was so they created a monster. 2001. So our daughter, so they could get away with it with a foreigner. So 14 years later, they did the same thing to my mother. So my mother was having a heart problem, and she went to stay with her daughters, and her daughters were trying to kill her. That same Flora put my mother in the back of a car and went and hit somebody's house. They had to call the ambulance. And the police had to respond. And so my mother said she felt that Flora did it intentionally. Because that Flora knows how to drive. And my mother knows how to drive also. She just didn't see that Flora went away from the road and did like a left turn into somebody's house. Intentionally. I was trying to scare my mother to death because my mother had a heart problem. I was trying to kill my mother that way. So my mother survived. Then the daughter's husband, Yinde, was a black American, and he was in the military. He said he ran off from his upstairs bedroom, was trying to punch my mother to scare her to death. They called the police went and arrested her. So my mother ran away from the Flores house in Pennsylvania, went to other daughter's Polanyi's house. The abuse continued. He said, anytime it snowed, that Polanyi would leave snow on the floor. And that Polanyi never used to do that. So that 2014, before my mother was killed in 2015, that Polanyi would leave snow on the floor. Anytime it's so when my mother tries to go outside, she would almost fall, trip and fall. Because if someone has a heart problem, if they trip and fall, they would die. So like they were playing Home Alone on my mother. The movie Home Alone, when the guy was, I think Trump starred in it, and this kid was left home alone and was trying to kill the thieves and set stuff on the floor. They were trying to kill my mother that way. Like it was a freaking joke. Like the way they also tried to kill me. They held me hostage. My mother said they were trying to inherit money because they were into insurance fraud, and also they were monitoring my case because I had filed a lawsuit against the NYPD in 2013. And Uganda was trying to help me with the papers. 2014, the police went and choked him dead in Staten Island because the police unlawfully evicted me and my mother in 2010. So that case was going on in Brooklyn Federal Court because Brooklyn Federal Court has jurisdiction over Staten Island. So, and I couldn't get no help. My friend Uganda killed I was kidnapped in 2001. The immigration also arrested me for wearing a jumpsuit to America. So it was just, being abused everywhere. Nobody would help me. So in 2015, my mother was there with her daughters. And when the daughter politely saw that my mother didn't die quickly from the snowfall left on the floor of the house, that my mother would trip on and fall on. So this politely was feeding my mother like car poison. Car antifreeze fluid. I think it's called car antifreeze fluid. Yeah. So my mother said anytime this mother gave her food, my mother would start having pain in her chest, like she's about to have a heart attack. And after my mother comes back to New York, within a couple of days, she start feeling better. As soon as she goes just to use the bathroom, and as soon as she'll have diarrhea and stuff, vomiting, and then she'll feel fine, like nothing ever happened to her. But as soon as she returned back to this daughter, Bolale, eats the food again, she'll start feeling like sharpening in her chest, and anytime she stops eating the food, vomit, pees, uses the bathroom, diarrhea, and everything, then she start feeling better after like a couple of days. So she was suspecting, I think this girl has been trying to poison me. When it happened again, she was now having sharpening in her chest. So she said, my mother decided to leave Pennsylvania for good. Got on the Greyhound, came to New York. On the way here, I think they must have increased the dosage of the car fluid because my mother kept surviving the other dosages. So this time was real serious, So my mother said she didn't, the pain. So she got in the Greyhound bus, and she was having a heart attack on the bus, And the bus wanted to pull over to New Jersey. But my mother told the bus driver to keep driving because her daughters are college graduates and they work for the hospital system in Pennsylvania. And it's like there's only one main hospital in Pittsburgh. It's such a small town. And her daughters used to work for the hospital, so my mother didn't want to go to a hospital there because her daughters know all the doctors, and they would be willing to cover her up because my mother was just a foreigner and her daughters speak with an American accent and have friends. They went to high school in Pennsylvania, so she didn't want to be under that kind of setup. So she decided to flee. That's why she fled from Pennsylvania while she was having a heart attack to New York. So she wasn't crazy, And on the bus, the Greyhound bus, she had a heart attack. People on that bus may remember the bus pulled over. Eyewitness on the bus, 2015. Maybe somebody bought the Greyhound. It was around May. My mother was killed May 20th, May 13, 2015. Anybody that used a credit card from Pittsburgh to, on the bus with my mother, they may be witness. They saw that my mother was having a heart attack. The bus pulled over in Pennsylvania and New Jersey from Pennsylvania. And my mother said, no, the bus should keep driving to New York. She wanted to be far away from Pennsylvania as possible. She felt her daughters were dangerous and they were trying to kill her for money, inheritance money, and all that. So when my mother got to New York, she collapsed on the floor. They took her to Bellevue Hospital, and she was starting to feel better. But they couldn't find the poison in her system because, for the I believe for car antifreeze poison, your blood test wouldn't show it. You have to die first, and they had to do an autopsy. So her daughter said she was getting better. And my mother said her daughters then showed up in the hospital, even though my mother didn't tell them what hospital she was in. And they showed up in the hospital and told the hospital to go lock her up in the psych ward. Even though my mother, her daughters were aware that my mother was a Pentecostal Christian. And the last time she had a heart problem, in 2003, she traveled to Nigeria. A pastor Joshua prayed for her, and she believed she got healed. He called the synagogue church. So my mother always shows her daughters, they're Pentecostal Christians, also her daughters, Bolani and Flora. So my mother always showed her daughters that videos of that Pastor Joshua, so they know about him and they know my mother believes in faith healing. As a matter of fact, my mother used to tell her daughter, there's a ministry called Kenneth Hagin Ministries. So my mother would tell the daughter, when my mother was in Nigeria, would tell the daughter, Flora, to help her buy Christian magazines, Christian tapes, because the Nigerian currency was so low in value. So, and her daughters was here in America. My mother was in Nigeria. So the daughters would help my mother pay for the Christian tapes and mail it to my mother in Nigeria. So our daughters know my mother believes in faith healing. Pastor Hagin, I don't know how to pronounce his name real good, was somebody that believed he was resurrected by God from the dead. He also died of a heart attack at a young age. I said was in the hospital. He saw his spirit leave his body. You saw My mother's daughters know my mother was a Pentecostal Christian. They're Pentecostal Christians too. So my mother put in a medical record since 2003 that when she had a aortic dissection, she went to Coney Island Hospital. They were trying to do a surgery for her at Coney Island Hospital, and she told them that she didn't want to have surgery. She would go to Nigeria for faith healing. So they put it in a medical record that this woman can't have surgery because of her religious belief. Since 2003, they put it in a New York City hospital record that she can't have surgery. So and she went to Nigeria in 2003. She believes the pastor's prayer helped heal her. When she came back to America, did a X-ray. The heart disease was gone. So now in 2015, her heart started clogging up. Because her daughters were feeding her this poison, and all of a sudden her heart started clogging up for whatever. And so in 2015. So my mother told the hospital that she doesn't want to have surgery. It was supposed to be an elective surgery, but now she has a new heart problem. She was healed of the aortic dissection in 2003 through prayers. Now they said she had a mild inflammation. And the U.S. Justice Department told the hospitals in America to stop giving people that have heart inflammation like that a catheter. I believe that's what it was. They said that catheter has a lot of side effects. It was the first pharmaceutical companies pushing it on people. I said, do not give elderly that catheter because it gives a lot of side effects. And my mother used to read medical journals, so she told the Bellevue Hospital, hell no, she doesn't want a catheter. She would rather, and she said because she was homeless, she didn't want to have any surgery done in case of there's any side effects. She wants to have a home where she can, retire to and have a nursing assistant come work with her in a home because she didn't want to go to nursing home. Because my mother was a home health aide and a nursing assistant. Said there's a lot of abuse in nursing homes. So she was like, she has to fix her housing situation. And she passed the mental health test in the hospital. So the hospital was ready to discharge her, because she didn't want to. She was trying to feel a little better. So the doctor, even though she still had a high blood pressure, so our daughters told the hospital to lock her up in the psych ward, and were provoking my mother to fight our daughters. And our daughters knew she wasn't crazy, and our daughters had money. My mother was like, she doesn't want to go to Pennsylvania anymore because, anytime she goes there, the daughter was feeding her poison. She didn't trust the daughter. So my mother was she's going to remain in New York. And she was working on senior housing. They were about to approve a senior housing. She has friends here in New York. My mother went to college in New York, graduated from Bronx Community College. They said a graduation picture was the most beautiful, and they even the school paid her. So, because she was, they've never seen an African woman have so much beauty, and then she graduated from Bronx Community College. So the school paid her to keep the graduation picture as a school treasure, and then she went to Long Island University in Brooklyn, and so she has a lot of friends here in New York that had houses, so she was going to be fine, and she was working, and even her pastor was a real estate agent. And she goes to that church, a pastor, I can't remember the name of the pastor right now. He's on Staten Island. What's his name again? Yeah, he owns a church on Staten Island. He was a real estate agent, so my mother would have been fine. So my mother said she's not going back to Pennsylvania. And the daughters said they should lock her up in the psych ward. Failed mental illness or no. My mother, even though my mother had passed the mental health test, and her daughters knew my mother was a Pentecostal Christian. She always listens to Kenneth Hagin, who got resurrected from the dead from heart disease. So, and my mother's pastor in Nigeria was saying that year was going to be a year of resurrection. People shouldn't worry. You should just pray to God, and God is going to resurrect them, and my mother's daughters are also Pentecostal Christian. As a matter of fact, our daughters were going to a Nigerian church also, Winners Church. One of them was going to, that believe in the same thing, that God can resurrect people and stuff. So that's for our daughter Bolanle, who was going to a Nigerian church, a Pentecostal church, to not tell the hospital to lock my mother in the psych ward for her Christian belief. That means my mother said that Bolanle was just interested in getting money. So my daughter just wanted my mother to die early because she believes the lawsuit I filed against the NYPD for booting us from our home unlawfully, and Arizona was trying to help us with the case, and Arizona got killed. She believed the city would pay us a lot of money just to shut up, So she believed if my mother is dead, that money will go to her as inheritance money. So that Bolale is very calculated. Because that Bolale was going to a Nigerian church also, Winners, Pentecostal church, and they believe in the same thing, that God can heal you through prayers. So it wasn't like that Bolale who doesn't know what Christianity is. So she was going to a Nigerian church, also in Pennsylvania, Winners and stuff. At least, she knew, that Bolale knew my mother was a Pentecostal Christian. And my mother used to, get, they used to pay for the cassette tape. Because my mother wasn't used to, she used to tell her to buy her Kenneth Hagin's cassette tapes and send it to Nigeria. So they knew my mother believed. My mother wasn't crazy. She has had a Christian belief since the 80s. This wasn't just a newly formed belief in 2015. So every evidence shows our daughters knew my mother wasn't crazy. She has a right to a religious belief, and you can't use somebody's stuff. And to not tell the hospital to lock her up in the psych ward. And our daughters know my mother lived in New York since the 70s. She went to college here. She has a lot of friends here. She would have been fine. She would have been here. She was working here. Our daughters knew all that. And she wasn't telling our daughters if they wanted to help her, they should just help her pay rent. Even our daughters rented according to them, they rented what's that thing called? It's not a Uber, Airbnb. Our daughters rented an Airbnb when they came to New York. Because they live in Pennsylvania, they don't have a house here. So my mother said, she doesn't want to go back to Pennsylvania with them. That there's something going on in there. The daughter drove her in a car to hit the wall of another person's house. Yeah, the daughter's husband was trying to punch her. The other daughter, Bolale, was leaving snow fall on the floor for my mother to trip over, and the other daughter, Flora, came to visit the Bolale and fell on the snow for the ambulance to take her to the hospital. So all the evidence is there. So my mother said it's too crazy in that Pennsylvania. Violence. My mother said, no, I'm not going back with you to Pennsylvania. If you're going to help me, rent a place for me in New York. Our daughters have a college degree. As a matter of fact, my mother won a lot of money for lead poisoning for our daughter, Flora. And the daughter, every time that money, as a child, that money was in our daughter's bank account. Our daughter, Flora, had a platinum credit card. Had money, had like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Through that lawsuit, that money appreciated and stuff. And as a matter of fact, when they came to New York to bother my mother, they had rented an Airbnb. They both have their private houses in Pennsylvania. Each daughter has a house, had cars. The other daughter, Flora, used to go on vacation to Disney World, to Mexico. Around that time, that daughter, Flora, had a lot of money. So my mother was like, I'm not going to Pennsylvania with you. It's so crazy down there. If you want to help me, rent a place for me and my child. Because I was homeless on the street. I was just roaming the street. And our daughters had money. Our daughters used to go on vacation. Flora had a lot of money because my mother won money in Brooklyn for her. For lead poisoning. When she was a child. So she still had that money left. And that daughter Flora would take that money to travel on vacation. To Disney World. To Mexico. Not the city. The country. Was just going on vacation, 5-star everywhere, platinum credit card. I came all the way from Pennsylvania to bother my mother. I was staying in an Airbnb. So my mother was like, no, she doesn't want to go to Pennsylvania with them. If they can rent her a place in New York. Because she's qualified for senior housing. And a social worker was helping her with senior housing in New York. They were about to approve her. She told her daughters, if you want to help her, pay a rent. So me and her, I was roaming the street. I was a foreigner, abused by the immigration, abused by everybody. I was just roaming the street like a crazy person, I wasn't crazy. So my mother was telling her daughters, help. She was telling them to help me. They were like, hell no. And they told her if they want to help her, she rents a place. Our daughters had an Airbnb, and they told the doctor to lock her up in the psych ward. That's going to be a hole. They told the hospital to lock my mother up in the psych ward. So my mother said she's not going to no psych ward. So never. So the sound was really loud. they killed my mother. The daughter had an Airbnb. They said, no, the Airbnb is not for my mother. Psych ward is at home. They wanted to kill her so they can inherit the money because I had a lawsuit against the NYPD. And that they did. My mother was like, never. Psych ward is not at home. So they said my mother resisted because she passed the mental health test. And because that Bellevue hospital, they said it's a prison hospital. They always treat people like Rikers Island prisoner. So if you mess up, Adoras must have gotten all the information that that's the right place to get the police and their security to beat you to death. They say they treat everybody like a prisoner. They set my mother up. They told the hospital to lock her up in the psych ward. I killed my mother. My mother, at that time I had already got my green card approved. The immigration gave me 2 green cards mistakenly. I held one, my mother held one. And Adoras killed my mother. And the green card my mother was holding for me, Adoras stole it. Then the immigration, the police arrested me in 2019 as I'm roaming the street. Feigned mental illness on me, locked me up, stole my green card also. So today I don't have any green card left. Our daughter has my other green card after they killed my mother. They stole my passport, took it to Pennsylvania. So that's the holding me hostage number 2. The first time they held me hostage was in 2001 when I had my immigration case. In 2015, they killed my mother, snatched her body, went and dumped her in a corpse, in a mortuary in somewhere, a secret location in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey. Even though the medical examiner's office, I told them I want an autopsy for my mother, and they said Adoras don't want an autopsy. Because my mother was saying Adoras were poisoning her food, bobolani, with car fluid, antifreeze fluid. And that the only way you can prove car antifreeze fluid is after the person dies, and they do an autopsy of the brain, because the blood test wouldn't show. Because the body metamorphoses that stuff out of your body, and it goes hide in your brain, but you just clog your heart. So my mother's heart was being clogged. And she felt the food the daughter was feeding her, because the daughter works for an insurance company. He used to work for the for the hospitals in Pennsylvania. And the daughters were swimming in money, especially the one that my mother wanted the lead suit money for. Must have had hundreds of thousands of dollars at the time they killed my mother, but they wanted more, and they believe if my mother is dead, the money from the lawsuit, from the suing the NYPD for kicking me and my mother out in 2010, and Uganda trying to help us, and Uganda killed, they believe all that money will come to them. And they believe they can just dispose of me as trash, because, I'm a foreigner, it's very easy to abuse me as a foreigner, I'm also transsexual. So they believe they can inherit all the money. So this was their own superstardom, and they were taunting me, after they killed my mother, So I went to the medical examiner's office. I said my mother believes in resurrection, and a pastor in Nigeria said that year was going to be a year of resurrection. Anybody can Google Pastor Joshua, 2015 year of resurrection. He was praying on YouTube that God told him people are going to wake up from the dead in 2015. So I told the medical examiner's office, let me see my mother, I want to pray over her. They told me, hell no. You can't pray over her, you can't go near her. And I was like, this is a violation of the right of sepulchre. So they said, So I called Adoras in Pennsylvania. I said I went to the medical examiner's office. They told me I can't pray over her anything. So I'm trying to pray over my mother for resurrection. I said the Pastor Joshua was saying, I told his daughters this. I called them. I never used to speak with them, but because of trying to resurrect my mother, I spoke with them. I was speaking with them. I called them on the phone. So as soon as our daughters heard I was trying to pray resurrection prayer for my mother, they came and snatched her body out of the medical examiner's office, like conscious of their guilt. They didn't want my mother to wake up from the dead and speak up. They came and snatched her body and went and hid her body in Jersey. So when I found out she was being hidden in the child's funeral home in New Jersey, I contacted that child's funeral home. And I said, look, my mother believes in resurrection. I sent the videos of Pastor Joshua saying that year was going to be a resurrection. And I told them, the child's funeral home in New Jersey. I don't remember the full name. I sent him an email from Google, from my Gmail. I said, my mother believes in resurrection. And I said, my mother's daughters brought a body from New York, where I was trying to pray the resurrection prayer on my mother. Because Pastor Joshua, that my mother normally goes to pray in his church in Nigeria, says people are going to wake up from the dead. For real, in 2015. And I said, I want to pray that prayer from YouTube. And that Pastor Joshua prayed that prayer of resurrection, saying you should be praying over any dead person so that they're going to wake up. So I wanted to pray that prayer over my mother from YouTube. So I sent that prayer to that funeral home in New Jersey. And that funeral home told me, no, you're not going to be able to see your mother. You have to pay us $1,000. I said, I'm homeless on the street. I really don't have that money. And they said, that's it, you can't pray. They kidnapped my mother's body. I believe our daughter saw them. We don't want this woman to resurrect. They don't want my mother to talk from the dead. So even though I sent an email to the church funeral home, it was a Black American guy, that church funeral home, and he told me, no, you can't see your mother, which is against the right of sepulchre. They have no right to go and present a fraudulent paper at my mother's daughter to the medical examiner's office and kidnap my mother's corpse. And the prayer on YouTube, that Pastor Joshua left that prayer on YouTube down here. So you pray this prayer over the dead, they're going to resurrect and stuff. He believes in resurrection. I was going to, as that Pastor Joshua predicted, because my mother really believed in that Pastor Joshua, and she believed that stuff was true, and my mother kept saying it, that Pastor Joshua, if he says it, God must mean it. So as soon as my mother died, I was, I took my phone to the medical examiner's office. I had minutes on my phone. I was going to pray that prayer on my mother's body, and the medical examiner's office said, "Oh no, you can't pray here." So I called my mother's daughters. I took my phone to the medical examiner's office. I was going to pray that Pastor Joshua's prayer. He said, because he was saying that prayer will resurrect the dead. So as soon as my mother's daughters heard about it, they came and snatched my mother's body. They didn't want her to wake up. Conscious of guilt much, they didn't want, they want her to remain dead because for the inheritance money. Because if she wakes up, now they can't get the inheritance money. This is not funny. This is horror. This is horror. I was horrified. From immigration prison, from wearing jumpsuit to America and being locked up in immigration prison and then being kidnapped in Pennsylvania Psychiatric Hospital, to my mother's body being tossed around. So I contacted the funeral home in Jersey. This is now a tri-state thing. This now a national, everybody's jumping in and abusing me and my mother and her corpse. So the funeral home is a Black American funeral home. I don't mean to disparage Black Americans. I'm sure there's a racial, ethnic element to this. So our daughters are like, they sound American. So I guess, the funeral home was more comfortable in dealing with our daughters because, they're more American than me, So the funeral home told me no. I sent them the video I was going to pray on YouTube. The funeral home told me no. I have to pay them $1,000 to see my mother. So they held my mother hostage. Without my permission, kidnapped my mother's body because my mother's daughters went and presented a fraudulent paper to the medical examiner's office saying, they have the proper authority, which they don't have the proper authority. Every child must consent before anybody removes the body. One child can just go lie, so they have all the proper authority. And the medical examiner, if all the children don't consent, they have to take the case to court. And they have to wait till the court orders which child has the proper permission. And they will the court will interview a child and see which child has the best interest of the mother at heart. So they weren't going to follow the procedure over an African woman. So, I couldn't pray that prayer of resurrection. So my mother's body was kidnapped to New Jersey. So now, and they went and buried my mother's body in New Jersey. I couldn't make it to the funeral home. So they told me I have to shop with $1,000. I didn't have $1,000 or more. I didn't have money on me, and stuff. It was just a mess, So they prevented me from praying the prayer of resurrection. I didn't even know how to get there. It was a remote town in New Jersey, So it's like they were intentionally taunting me. They wanted me to die also, so they could get all that money for themselves. They wanted to get the inheritance money, and they must have had a life insurance policy on me also, my mother's daughter. So now, my mother's daughters are part of a gang, and they're into drugs, especially that Bolan Lane.